Thanks very much, Chair. Minister, in my constituency takes in Newcastle West with 7,000 people and Abbeyfield with over 2,000 people. They currently are in the throes of having a bypass for their town. This is very welcome for the people that have been in traffic queues from Limerick to Kerry and from many other parts of the country. However, for an individual owning a house, a farm or a business, it can be very traumatic, as I'm sure people will agree. The anxiety for people is huge, and I think there needs to be more done in managing the expectations for people, giving them realistic timelines. For instance, announcing people that it will take a minimum of 6 years for such a project, and to give people the breakdown of such a project, which it will take 2 years for this particular project to get it to a planning stage from Bord Pleanála, which it will minimum take between 6 months and 12 months for Bord Pleanála to make their ruling, and from the time that if they are granted planning permission, that it will take up to 3 years to do land acquisitions, houses, everything else that comes with it, it will take a further 3 years. This type of information needs to be brought out into the wider community to let people know this and to help them for future-proofing our country. I must give compliments to the Oireachtas councillors who had the foresight to see that withholding on a section of a greenway earlier, preventing funds being wasted at a later stage. That decision applied to a section of the greenway which was proposed where the bypass is going through. My question here today is to you, Minister, is for the Transport Infrastructure Ireland, TII, in respect to the criteria that they follow relates to the cost ratio, returning of investment, least impact on residential homes, biodiversity, agricultural impact, and archaeology. However, I am bothered as to how much input has been given to the Department of Housing in relation, for instance, the housing list in Newcastle West. And in Limerick City and County, it's 2,347. But in Newcastle West currently, there are 343 people waiting for houses. And in Abbeyfield, there's 139. And my concern is in relation to how planning can be made sustainable for the people of Newcastle West in conjunction with a bypass. This department also comprises of the heritage and local government. Secondly, has the TII liaised with the Department of Tourism? The Newcastle West Greenway will be crossed at least twice by the proposed route, which only officially opened 2 weeks ago at a cost of 100 million. Minister, I actually met your Deputy Brian Ledden at the opening of the Greenway. The Greenway is an absolutely fantastic piece of infrastructure. And on the day, Deputy Ledden told me that he cycled in from Abbeyfield into the Barna where the Greenway was being opened. But my question to Deputy Ledden at the time, I asked him how did he get from Limerick to Abbeyfield. And I'm a small bit, he was a bit red-faced that he couldn't answer me because he had to use a form of transport with his bike in the boot. And afterwards then he was heading off out to meet yourselves at the summit, and I asked him how was he going to get from Barna, because he'd go to get an engine test and then head to the airport where he had to load his bicycle into the boot of another car to return to where he had to go to. And I do acknowledge that the bus routes that are proposed for Limerick, but all the bus routes that you've proposed, the majority of them are for West Limerick. You haven't fulfilled for East Limerick either. Yes, West Limerick is on a tourist destination, and I welcome everything that comes into West Limerick, but I also have to cover the areas of East Limerick, where we also want the infrastructure put into place. To date, Minister, there's 250,000 people have used the Limerick Greenway. And I am questioning the joined-up thinking was in relation to accountability of these two departments for future-proofing the two market towns, Newcastle West and Abbeyfeale. And my question, Minister, is, after this project, and I have complimented the Greenway, and I've walked it myself and I've cycled it myself, and it is a brilliant amenity. But now with this proposed route that has been put on the people of Newcastle West, we are now telling the people that the Greenway is going to be crossed at least twice. That's a waste of taxpayers' money. I mentioned that the Oireachtas councillors, which I was a member at the time myself, had the foresight to stop the Greenway on that section until the bypass was built, and then it could be used alongside it, saving the money. And the money that actually was saved actually went towards the Newcastle West District Greenway. But surely to God, all the departments would have joined up thinking, this route didn't happen yesterday or today. This route, if there was proposed routes, we could have created something to go over. We could have created something to go under. We could have created a load of things to allow for such a road structure. But now we have to tell the people of Newcastle West and the users of the Greenway that if this road goes ahead, we now have to stop you using the Greenway in two different sections. That's not right. So, Minister, I would like to say to you that from the point of view of forward planning, I would like now for the people, especially of Newcastle West, that they are informed properly, they are being given the full process, and whatever services are available to them personally to save the anxiety of having a bypass coming through your home or your land, that this is dealt with. And I spoke to one particular woman, and her father came to the house that is on one of the routes, and they are there since the 1800s. Her great-grandfather. And her father was born into that house in 1915, and she was born herself 52 years ago into the house. And there's fierce memories and things. But at the same time, this woman said to me that it's anxiety of all her past and historical past that's within her home, and that they had to rely on the internet to figure out what was happening around the land, around their own house, and for a proposed route, and that there was no communication between the TII and themselves. Now to talk in relation into the scooters. I welcome any regulation around any motorised vehicle. I believe whether it's a scooter, a motorcycle or whatever it is, there is laws there for all of us, and we have to respect the laws that are there. And I'd welcome, for anything from the point of view of safety around scooters, I would welcome it. And I've heard people here today talking about scramblers and quads, and they talk about everything that's within an area. But I've grown up in an area where quads and scooters and scramblers have been used. But the government keeps taking away, saying that you can't drive this here and you can't drive that there, you can't drive this here. Why not turn around and invest in somewhere where they can drive it? You see people that want to drive in the likes of motorsport, they go to a centre, the likes of Mondello Park. You see people that want to go horse riding, they have horse riding tracks. I've been brought up in a culture, and people, what they call us, is that I suppose I would be considered a petrol head, is what they would have said, going up in the day. I am into the vintage, and I do support our heritage, from the basic of the steam engine, up along to the tractors, and up along, even from the horses and everything, up along to today. That is my culture, and it was my heritage. And I use that today with other people in the vintage societies to recognise our heritage. But we also use it for raising money for much needed charities and people that need funding in a hurry. I watch motorsport, I watch the motorbikes, I watch everything. And I love watching it. But if you're taking something away from somebody, and especially within a city or a large town, give them an alternative. We can educate people when it's in a controlled environment, but let's give them something from what their culture is. And we mentioned the e-scooters here. Yes, they should be regulated within built-up areas and all, and where there's people safety involved. And yes, where there's people with disabilities should be invested in. But it goes back to the point that I've just made to you about when the Greenway was opened with Deputy Ledden. There was no infrastructure to take your deputy to the Greenway. And this is what I've been saying since I first came here to the door. It's great, we all have the green agenda. We all want to lower our carbon footprint. We all want to do it. But in order to do that, you have to put infrastructure. And what I see at present is we've put the cart before the horse. I can tell you that there's many students in our area cannot get to college by using bus transport because the bus transport will not get them there on time. They cannot use bus transport if they go to a local town because even if they're living outside town, because there's no adequate parking space where they could park their vehicle and get on a bus and go to college. This is why I'm always saying infrastructure. And I would like to know as well, from a point of view of rolling out bus services throughout the whole country, that the private bus operator can seem to when even you're handing out your bus routes through for the schools, and they're given a figure to run their bus routes. If we mirror that with bus agents' routes that they do themselves, I guarantee you the private bus provider is getting a lot less than the subsidies that are going to the department's buses themselves. That's wrong. I do know that the bus providers at the moment have offered to give services in areas which you haven't even looked at yet. And the department is telling them, no, we're not looking at that area yet, it's only proposed route. Why? Because they want to get all the money into their own government-funded buses, so they can come up with a route where they know that they don't have to have a business plan in place because we're going to be funded 100% to run these bus routes. Why not think outside the box and come to and look at the private bus operators? These are the people that take my child to school. Even though I have to travel a mile or two up the road to get on the bus, my son gets on the bus and he goes to school. A lot of people in the rural areas would use rural transport if it was there, but it's not there. And what I want you to do is, I want you to look at the whole of Ireland. And I said yesterday when we were talking about the emissions, Ireland in Europe is 0.01% of the issue with emissions in Europe. That's 1/10 of 1%. Ireland in the whole globe, in the world, is 0.04. But yet, we are bringing in products from outside of Ireland that are responsible for 35% one country, 25% another, and we're importing more and more from them countries. And we're only 0.04 in the world. Why not look at investing in our own section and bringing work for our own people? We now know that the best produce in the world comes out of Ireland. We have grass-fed animals producing milk and producing beef. We have the best conditions and soils for growing vegetables and everything else that comes with it. We have the best milk in the country because the Golden Vale, as I said, the best grass lands fed. Why can't you invest in our farming, invest in all the business that can actually sustain what we have now and not adding to some other country? Because when you round it up, we're only always talking about Ireland and the change we need to make, the change we need to make. The changes are in the world. And the changes that we can make in the world is stop importing goods from areas that are absolutely killing this planet. That is the answer, is stop importing and use our own produce. But whatever you're after getting tied up inside in Europe, you seem to be brainwashed because you're using their statistics for Ireland. Ireland could be self-contained ourselves, and we could reduce imports coming into this country. And by using our own products, it will bring down the prices for everyone to live here. I've always mentioned to you that the port where 98% of our products come into this country comes in through Dublin. How many trucks are you meeting on the motorway to bring produce to our doors to feed our families are coming in through Dublin? I've asked you to invest in fines, which you said you're investing in fines. We could have the transport costs around this country if we get fines up and running now. It would take the largest ship in Europe can dock in fines. And it would centralise goods leaving from the likes of Limerick. We could centralise it in the country. Whereas you're up at the top in Dublin. We're centralised. We can actually make a difference if we get the investment. I said last Thursday fortnight I left here, and I've tried different routes to try and get out of Dublin. And to go from here at 4:30 of a Thursday took me 1 hour and 32 minutes to get to the Red Cow, which is 9.6 kilometres. I then travelled 217 kilometres to my home in 2 hours and 7 minutes. I'm driving a diesel vehicle which does about 80 kilometres to the gallon. For me to come to Dublin here, the nearest train station to me is Charleville. For me to use Charleville train station to get here, and if I'm delayed, like we were last night, I can't get the train back down because the last train service leaves earlier. So then I go to the green bus. If I go to the green bus, it will drop me to Oireachtas Quay, it will drop me to Adair. But the problem is, I have to get someone then to come and collect me and bring me home. When I work out the carbon footprint to try even getting me to Dublin, it's less of a carbon footprint for me to use my car than to use all the transports that I have to try and get. Because for someone to drop me to the train station, go home. They have to come back and collect me, go home. The same with the bus. There's no adequate parking there for people to park their cars for a couple of days. The same with the students that want to use bus transport. You have no infrastructure for parking facilities, and they would use it. So, Minister, I do appreciate what you're trying to do, but you're doing it from within a bubble of a city area. And everything that I'm listening to about the scooters today in the city area, it's all about city. I do believe that these electric scooters shouldn't be used on a greenway because, again, a greenway is for people to go with their families to walk, recreational, and cycle. And it's a place for exercising. But on a basis of somebody, if they wanted to try and get from A to B, they would have to use the greenway because they couldn't use a scooter on the main road. You couldn't use a scooter on our road because the wheels in the scooter wouldn't work. The circumference of the wheel is too small. And by the time that they hit all the potholes and the rough terrain that they'd have to hit on our roads, you'd at least need a 100mm wall of a tyre like you'd have in a car to sustain all the bumps. Again, from lack of investment in our roads in the rural areas. So I'd like you to think outside of the city areas and look at Ireland as a whole and bring all of Ireland together. You'll get an awful lot more with honey than you will with vinegar. But the only people that are suffering all the time when you make changes in Dublin is people from a rural area because they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice but to use a car. And they can't afford to buy the electric vehicles because they're too expensive. And not only that, the range wouldn't be in them for them to sustain what they're doing. So why don't you think of an incentive to bring one electric car into every household in Ireland and subsidise the one electric car, 50% for any household that will reduce their cars by 50%, give them one car at 50% price to see can we at least improve and encourage people into an electric vehicle. By doing it one, we can then incentivise for the years on when the infrastructure is put in place. Thank you, Minister.